Alright, so this is a suggestion via a donation. The name of the video is The History of Whiteness. This is coming from Tim Weiss. The History of Whiteness? Let's let's do this, guys. We're here.
Say that again. The whole history of America is the history of rich white men telling not rich white people that their enemies are black and brown. It starts in the colonies of what would become the United States. Let's remember.
Okay, so we're definitely going way back in history.
During the colonial period, mid-1600s, there was no such thing as white people.
Mid-1600s. Yeah, there were no one called themselves white at all. They called themselves German, Swedish, Finnish, Danish. There was absolutely no whiteness.
I know some people who are now called white find that shocking, right? Because they think whiteness is real.
Well, not Italian. Italians were accepted into whiteness much later. And I mean much later. They were still being basically held up by the neck, let's say, pretty deep into the 1800s.
But whiteness was created. Europeans didn't call themselves white. We didn't call ourselves white. We weren't all members of one big happy family. Are you kidding? Have you studied the history of Europe? The history of Europe was about killing each other.
It's wild.
That's what we did in Europe. We just killed each other before we figured out there were other people to kill. We just killed each other, right?
Wow.
I mean, that was the history.
Bro, who is this man?
Of Europe, the English hated the Irish, right?
Right.
Northern Italians didn't even think that Southern Italians were Italians. The Germans hated everybody.
Right. Yep. The Northern Italians absolutely did not take anything from Southern Italians, guys. Absolutely. You're right. Because there was a weird line between like the Austrians and the Sicilians. Visually they are extremely generally different.
And everybody hated their ass right back, right?
The Germans.
There was no team called white, no race called white, but all of a sudden, in the middle of the 1600s, there was. Why? Why was it suddenly necessary to create this thing called the white race? Well, because rich people can count, that's why.
Oh.
And so rich folks looked around, the ones that owned all the land, in the colonies, the colonial elite looked around and they realized something, that they were heavily outnumbered by African enslaved folks, by European indentured servants, who were just one level above a slave, or other Europeans who weren't technically indentured servants, but they were still peasants, didn't have any money, didn't have any land, and they could do the math. They added it up, and they were like, damn, we got to figure out a way to split these folks apart from one another, or they're going to rise up and take our stuff.
Let them into the club.
Right? Because after a while, these black folks who were enslaved Africans and these quote-unquote white folks who were poor Europeans are going to figure out they're all getting played by these rich people. Right? So ultimately, the rich figure out they got to come up with some way to get somebody in that group on their team.
And guys, what's funny about this here, well, not really funny, but times have changed, but not really, right? And what I mean by that is the same groups that at one time in history were pretty much riding together until the absolute elites separated things, conquer and divide. They divide and conquer. That's what they did, guys, right? And the same groups are still battling each other over nonsense. Instead of coming together, taking on literally the rich elites, you battle with each other on Facebook because you guys look different. All right? It's absolutely silly, okay? The concept of blackness, the concept of whiteness is absolutely ridiculous, bro. Right? Somebody asked me the other day, pretty regularly, I rather say someone of European descent. I like that sounding, I like that better, right? Than just, I don't know, guys. It just feels weird because, again, I'm pretty much a student of history, right? Like, I know good about what he's saying here, right? Nothing is shocking or surprising me. We're probably going to end up somewhere around Bacon's Rebellion, right? I smell that coming, right? Let's get
the easiest thing is to get the poor Europeans, right?
Right.
At least they look like you. They sort of share some of the customs and the culture. So they all of a sudden create this thing called whiteness, and they say, now you're part of the club. Now we're going to let you testify in court, enter into contracts, vote, at least if you're a man, own a little bit of land, at least if you're a man.
Yeah.
Right? And we're going to get rid of indentured servitude. No more of that, because you're too good for that. And we're going to take the white men, now called white men, and put them on the slave patrol to keep black people in line.
Overseers.
Give them a horse and a gun and a badge and make them feel big and powerful, right? They're still poor,
Yeah.
Still don't have anything. They didn't pay
Nothing.
the slave patrol well.
No.
Right? Just exploited them, used them as a buffer between the elite and the other poor folks, particularly poor folks of color. And pretty soon, the rebellions that occasionally happened where black and white got together to overthrow the elite, those stopped because the divide and conquer had begun to work.
The Sanford experiment. Google that.
Right? You could turn people against each other by telling those poor white folks they got to keep these black people in line. And so that divide and conquer gets initiated in the colonies. Rich white men telling not rich white people that their enemies are black and brown. Fast forward to the Civil War era. And you have, I'm from the South, right? My people, the elite in my part of the country, right, actually announced that the reason they wanted to break away from the Union and possibly go to war with their brothers and sisters to the North was in order to maintain slavery and white supremacy.
Okay, that is absolutely not true, sir. Okay, you're saying things that are interesting, they're great, they're cool. Sure, why not, right? But here's the problem. They wanted to rebel against the North because of state rights. Ask around, okay? Ask around. It has nothing to do with what holding people in bondage. All right, it had nothing to do with that. It had everything to do with states' rights. Sarcasm, guys.
He said that at the time. We lie about it now.
Yeah.
And we say it had nothing to do with that. But of course, at the time, they didn't have any shame about it, so they just said it openly. Right? The vice president of the Confederacy, Alexander Stephens, said that the cornerstone of the new government was the great truth that the Negro was not the equal of the white man. So that's the reason the Confederacy was formed and existed. But here's the trick. If I'm rich and I want to go to war to protect my ownership in other human beings, my property, but you're poor and you don't own any enslaved people, why the hell would you go fight to protect my stuff? Because I'm a rich person. I'm not going to fight. Rich people don't go to war, right? Rich people get poor people to go to war for them.
Has he been canceled, guys? I want to know. I mean, you're saying all of the things that I think any logical person can sit down and think deeply on, right? I mean, yeah, there are a lot of people who are impoverished that when you speak to them, the first thing they want to do is join the military. Why? It has the potential to give them some type of upward mobility, right? I was raised in an area where there were a lot of like affluent people, and I don't know a single person that went to the military. Not a single person. All right.
Whether it's in 1860 or whether it's during the 1960s or whether it's today, right?
Now I know people, but growing up, right? Not a single person I knew growing up, like from high school specifically, went to the military. Not a single one.
Folks get doctors to write notes for them that say that they have heel spurs, and that's why they can't go to Vietnam. And if you don't know who I'm talking about, you can Google that shit because he's sitting in the White House right now.
Right. Captain Bone Spurs.
Oh, I can't go fight. I have heel spurs. Send some poor kids to do that for me, please. Right? So that's been a long...
Okay, so we now know with him stating that he's coming from most likely the left.
Long-standing tradition. So the rich have to figure out a way to convince the poor to go fight for them. But that's a hard thing. That's like a hard sell, right? Like, how the hell, why would you do that? Why would you go fight to protect my property rights when you don't own anything? The only way you would do it is if that rich person comes to you and says, hey, listen, you gotta go fight because we gotta maintain our way of life, because if these people get free, they're gonna take your jobs. No, fool, they already got your job. That's how it works, right? Because if I'm white and I gotta charge you $1 a day to work on the farm, but you can get a black person to do it for nothing because you own them, guess who got the job? Free got the job. Right? So in a sense, poor white folks would have been better off joining with black folks to overthrow the slave system that would have raised the wage floor of all working people. But they got tricked by rich white men telling them that their enemies were black and brown. Fast forward.
Yeah, basically. That's basically the game that has been run on the United States citizens for the last 200-300 years. All right, I'm going to say 200-300. I'm not going back further. I'm just saying right there. That's basically been the game that has been run on us. And there are people who have the ability to critically think, and there are people who are not, and then just get sucked up in that nonsense. They live their life thinking that that person across the street who looks different than you, right, who makes the same amount of household income as you, your wife, and he and his wife, right, the same exact, you think that somehow you're different than them. That's crazy. You guys pay the same taxes. Your kids go to the same schools. You are the same. Right? All right.
Forward to the 1930s. And you have white labor leaders. They're not even the elite, right? The labor leaders are not the elite, but they're the elite within the labor movement. And even they had fallen for it at this point. So they didn't want to integrate their unions. And they would say things like, well, we can't have black people and Mexicans and Chinese folks in our unions because if we do that, it's going to reduce the professionalism of our craft. We have to maintain the integrity of our profession. No, fool, you need more people in the damn union is what you need. And if you don't let those folks in, guess what happens? When you go out on strike, who is the boss going to use to replace you?
Them.
They're gonna replace you with the very same black and brown folks that you didn't want to work next to, right? And so at the end of and then you're going to blame them for taking your job rather than than the white rich dude for giving it to them.
Right.
Right? Divide and conquer. Telling not rich white folks that their enemies are black and brown. And now we fast forward to the president. We got the president of the United States becoming president on the basis of that same rhetoric. Telling not rich white folks that the reason they don't have a job is because Mexicans took them. Right? That's the argument. Keep in mind, there's been a net outflow of...
That's valid. That's valid. I mean... This is almost word for word.
Mexican folk from this country, out of this country in the last 10 years. Right now, border crossings and actual in-migration at the lowest level they've been since the 1970s. So anybody who believes that is a damn fool or somebody who does not understand how to do research on the internet or someone who doesn't care.
Okay, this is an old video because our borders are absolutely being pummeled currently. A lot of that has to do with, obviously, the 19, what happened. The entire world is basically going into a depression. There are people who are trying to leave their nations for our nation. That's basically what's happening. Is it amazing that this is happening? No, it's not. All right, it's too many people, bro. It's too many people. All of the excuses that the cities give for not being able to do anything for the actual citizens of the city themselves, and then to instantly just do it. We can do it. We can take more. But that's a little crazy, guys, all right? But all right.
Or somebody who does not understand how to do research on the internet or someone who doesn't care, right? But he says it. He says the reason you don't have a job is those brown folks took them.
Oh my. All right. I mean, listen, Tim Wise, great to meet you. I think the overall talk was solid. I mean, there's nothing that's overtly shocking or wrong. He's not like leaving things out. A lot of times when you guys send me videos that are similar to this here, I'm just like, bro, why are they telling one side of the story and not like the entirety of it, right? I mean, there is in fact knowledge of this. There's a history of this. It's obvious history, right? But there are people who just, unfortunately, make whiteness or blackness their identity. I guess, right? I mean, that is their identity completely. They attempt to embody whatever they think that actually means, right? This is what this means, so I need to be this, right? Bro, just be you. Always, right? But all right, listen, you guys all have an absolutely amazing day. Enjoy your day thoroughly. Guys, before we go, are you guys subscribed to the other channels? Logical Movie Reviews with Mr. L. Boyd along with Mr. L. Boyd Music. Both are found in the description. Check it out.